Since childhood, Clara knew she had a special gift. While other children played hide and seek or ran after kites, Clara spent hours by her grandmother's side, a retired nurse, listening to stories of miraculous healings and small acts of compassion that changed lives. These tales planted a seed of desire in Clara. She wanted to be like her grandmother, to be the person who brought hope and relief in the darkest moments. As Clara grew up, this calling flourished. She saw nursing not just as a profession, but as a vocation, a life mission. Each patient she cared for, every smile she managed to bring amid pain, reinforced her certainty that she was on the right path. Her colleagues admired her for her tireless dedication and ability to make patients feel cared for and loved. For Clara, each shift was an opportunity to make a difference, to turn suffering into hope. In the hospital corridors, Clara was a constant and comforting presence. Her energy seemed inexhaustible, and her heart, always open, welcomed all who needed a friendly shoulder or a word of encouragement. She firmly believed that healing came not only from medicines or medical techniques, but also from the love and empathy that healthcare professionals conveyed. This conviction guided each of her actions, making her presence felt far beyond the hospital walls. Clara was not afraid of facing challenges. Often, she was the first to volunteer for the most difficult cases, those that required not only technical skills but also a great deal of sensitivity. She saw the pain and suffering of her patients as a call to act, to be the light in the darkness. Her journey as a nurse was marked by stories of overcoming and courage, where the impossible became possible thanks to her determination and compassion. And so, Clara became an iconic figure in the hospital. Her colleagues knew they could count on her in times of crisis, and her patients, even the most critical ones, found in her a safe harbor. For Clara, each day was a new opportunity to live her vocation, to be the change she wished to see in the world. And it was this unwavering passion that led her to make a decision that would change her life forever. It was a quiet night, one of those rare occasions when Clara managed to get home before 10. She had just sat down on the couch with a cup of hot tea, her body finally relaxing after a long day at the hospital. The house was quiet, except for the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. For a moment, Clara thought she might finally have a night of rest. But fate had other plans. Her phone started vibrating on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. Clara hesitated for a second, feeling a pang of apprehension. However, her nurse's instinct made her answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice slightly tired but still firm. "Clara? It's Marta from the neighborhood. I know you're not on duty, but it's my husband, Joao. He's having a crisis. I don't know what to do. Please, help me." The urgency in Marta's voice was palpable, and Clara's heart raced. She knew Joao had heart problems, and every second could be crucial. Without thinking twice, Clara grabbed her first aid kit that she always kept ready for emergencies and rushed out the door. Upon arriving at Marta's house, Clara found Joao sweating profusely and struggling to breathe. Marta was by his side, her eyes wide with fear. Clara quickly took charge of the situation, adrenaline replacing any remaining fatigue she might have felt. "Joao, I'm here. Let's take care of you," Clara said calmly, contrasting with the urgency of the moment. She checked Joao's vital signs, realizing his condition was serious. Without hospital equipment, Clara would need to rely on all her experience and knowledge to stabilize him. She asked Marta to call an ambulance while she administered first aid. Time seemed to drag on, each second an eternity as Clara fought to keep Joao conscious and stable. She spoke to him constantly, keeping him focused and awake, ensuring he knew he wasn't alone. Finally, the ambulance sirens echoed down the street, bringing a relief that Clara didn't show. She continued working until the paramedics arrived and took over Joao's care. Clara provided all the necessary information, her voice firm and professional. As the ambulance drove away, Marta held Clara's hand, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved his life," Marta said, her voice choked with emotion. Clara smiled, the exhaustion finally starting to weigh on her again. "I did what anyone would do, Marta. I just hope he'll be okay." With one final wave, Clara returned home, feeling the weight of the day but also the satisfaction of having answered another urgent call. She knew she had made a difference, and that was what mattered. The scene was chaotic. Marta's living room, usually a tranquil refuge, was now transformed into a battleground against time. Clara knelt beside João, her first aid kit open on the floor with improvised equipment and essential medications scattered around. João, a robust middle-aged man, was pale and sweating profusely, his breathing quick and shallow, eyes wide with fear. "Marta, I need you to stay calm and help me," Clara said, her voice firm and controlled despite the gravity of the situation. Marta, still in panic, tried to hold back tears as she watched Clara work. Clara began by checking João's vital signs. His pulse was weak and irregular, a clear indication his heart was failing. He groaned in pain, one hand clutching his chest. Clara knew she was dealing with a possible heart attack, and every second was crucial. "João, I need you to stay with me. Take deep breaths. Okay? We'll get through this together," Clara said, trying to maintain a reassuring tone as her hands moved with precision and speed. She prepared a dose of nitroglycerin and administered it under João's tongue, hoping it would ease the pressure on his heart. "Marta, did you manage to call the ambulance?" Clara asked, not taking her eyes off João. "Yes, they're on their way," Marta replied, her voice trembling. Clara needed more information. "João, did you take your medication today? Any unusual pain before this happened?" João tried to respond, but the pain made it difficult to speak. Just felt tired. Didn't take the afternoon meds." Clara felt a pang of concern. She knew that without proper care, the situation could deteriorate rapidly. She grabbed her stethoscope and listened to João's chest, confirming her suspicions about the severity of the heart attack. "Marta, I need you to find João's medication. Quickly," Clara requested, and Marta rushed to the bedroom, returning with a bottle of pills. Clara administered the correct dose, all the while continuing to talk to João, keeping him conscious and calm. The distant wail of ambulance sirens brought brief relief, but Clara knew the work wasn't done yet. She needed to keep João stable until the paramedics arrived. Every second was a silent battle, a test of her skill and courage. When the paramedics finally entered the room, Clara gave a quick and detailed report of the situation. They looked at her with admiration and respect, knowing she had held the line between life and death with steady hands and a devoted heart. As the ambulance took João to the hospital, Marta collapsed in tears, holding Clara's hand with unspeakable gratitude. Clara, exhausted but determined, knew she had done everything she could. She looked at Marta and, with a faint smile, said, "He's in good hands now. Let's believe everything will be okay." The emergency had passed, but the impact of that moment would stay with Clara forever, reinforcing her conviction that every life touched was a life transformed. As the ambulance drove away, Clara felt exhaustion settling on her shoulders. She allowed herself a moment to take a deep breath, but soon heard a desperate cry from a neighbor. "Please, someone help. My daughter is unconscious." Without hesitation, Clara ran towards the sound. In the neighbor's yard, she found an 8-year-old girl lying on the ground, pale and unresponsive. Her father knelt beside her, in a panic. Clara knew every second counted. "I'm a nurse," she said, trying to calm the father. "Let me see what happened." Clara quickly assessed the situation. The girl wasn't breathing and had no pulse, a dire situation that demanded immediate action. Without proper equipment, Clara knew her options were limited, but she couldn't simply wait for the ambulance to arrive. "I'll start CPR," Clara said, positioning her hands on the girl's chest and beginning chest compressions. The father watched, paralyzed with fear and hope. Each compression was a silent prayer. Clara knew that without a defibrillator and other medical resources, the chances of success were slim. Nonetheless, she persisted, her hands working rhythmically and precisely. "Please hold on," Clara thought, her mind focused on keeping the girl alive. After what seemed like an eternity, the girl gave a small gasp. Clara paused for a moment, feeling immediate relief but also aware that the battle wasn't over. The girl was breathing again, but her condition was still critical. "Where's the ambulance?" Clara asked, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. "They said they're on their way," the father replied, his voice trembling. Clara knew she needed to stabilize the girl until help arrived. She checked the vital signs again, monitoring the fragile breathing and pulse. Every minute felt like an eternity, but Clara remained calm, knowing her decision to start CPR immediately had made a difference. Finally, the distant wail of sirens brought relief that Clara tried not to show. The paramedics arrived quickly, taking over the girl's care. Clara gave a detailed report of the situation, her hands still trembling slightly from the tension of the moment. As the girl was loaded into the ambulance, the father looked at Clara, tears in his eyes. "You saved her life. I don't know how to thank you." Clara simply smiled, fatigue beginning to weigh on her again. "I did what needed to be done. Let's hope she'll be okay." As the ambulance drove away, Clara finally allowed herself to feel the weight of the night. Her risky decision to act without proper resources had been the difference between life and death. And while she knew there would always be risks, the satisfaction of knowing she had saved another life was a powerful reminder of why she did what she did. Clara returned home, exhausted but with a heart full of gratitude and renewed determination. She knew that, regardless of the consequences, she would always be willing to make the necessary decisions to save those who needed her. The night had been long and filled with tension, but Clara finally allowed herself a moment of relief as she watched the ambulance drive away with the girl. However, she barely had time to catch her breath when her home phone rang again. It was from the hospital. A doctor on duty, urgency heavy in his voice, informed her that João had arrived and his condition was critical. Clara knew she couldn't rest yet. She rushed back to the hospital, her familiar place, but this time everything felt different. Clara was greeted by a scene of controlled chaos, with nurses and doctors hurrying to stabilize João. She quickly put on her coat and entered the emergency room, taking her place beside her colleagues. The atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. Clara approached João, surrounded by machines and monitors. His vital signs were still unstable, but there was a glimmer of hope. Clara worked alongside the team, performing complex and coordinated maneuvers to stabilize his condition. Hours passed like minutes. Clara stayed focused, administering medications, adjusting machines, and communicating with the team precisely and effectively. João was in the hands of dedicated professionals, but Clara knew her presence and actions were a crucial piece in this puzzle of life and death. Finally, João's vital signs began to stabilize. His once erratic breathing now became regular. His weak and irregular pulse had strengthened. Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she didn't let her guard down. "He's responding well," the doctor said, looking at Clara with gratitude. "Your work here made all the difference." Clara simply nodded, her mind still focused on João. She knew the danger hadn't completely passed, but every step in the right direction was a victory. As the doctor continued to monitor João, Clara stepped back slightly, giving space but always ready to act if needed. Hours later, when the situation finally stabilized and João was transferred to the ICU, Clara allowed herself to leave the emergency room. Outside, she found Marta waiting anxiously for news. Seeing Clara, Marta rushed to her, eyes full of questions and hope. "Is he going to be okay?" Marta asked, her voice trembling. Clara smiled, a smile that carried the promise of a new dawn. "He's stable now. The team did an amazing job. He'll need time and care, but we're on the right track." Marta hugged Clara, tears finally flowing freely. "Thank you, Clara. You didn't just save his life. You saved our lives, our family." Clara felt exhaustion in every fiber of her being, but also a deep sense of accomplishment. She knew she had done everything within her power, that her dedication and courage had contributed to a successful outcome, and that, more than anything else, was the true reward of her vocation. As Clara headed home, the sky began to lighten with the first rays of sun. The night had been tough, But Joao's successful rescue was a powerful reminder of the impact that an act of courage and compassion can have. With that, Clara knew she was ready to face whatever challenges the future held, always guided by the light of her calling. The hospital corridors, which Clara walked through daily, were abuzz with murmurs and curious glances the next morning. News of the previous night had spread quickly, and Clara became the center of unexpected attention. As she walked to her shift, she could feel her colleagues' eyes on her and catch snippets of conversation as she passed. "Did you hear what Clara did? She saved 2 lives off duty. But isn't that against hospital rules?" Clara tried to ignore the whispers, staying focused on her work. However, she couldn't avoid the growing discomfort. She knew her decision to provide care outside of working hours, though made with the best intentions, wouldn't be universally viewed. Upon entering the staff lounge, Clara found her colleagues gathered, discussing animatedly. When they saw her, the conversation abruptly stopped, and all eyes turned to her. Some expressions showed admiration, others concern. "Clara, what you did was amazing," Anna, one of the senior nurses, said. "But you know this could cause trouble, right?" Clara nodded, aware of the implications. "I understand, Anna, but I couldn't just ignore those emergencies. Joao and the girl needed me." "You followed your heart," another colleague, Maria, said, "and did what any good nurse would do. But the hospital has rules." Before Clara could respond, the nursing supervisor, Mrs. Marissa, entered the room. She was a woman of serious expression, known for her strict discipline. "Clara, I need to speak with you. Now." Clara felt a chill down her spine but followed Mrs. Marissa to her office. The walls were covered with certificates and awards, reflecting the hospital's excellence. Mrs. Marissa sat behind her desk and gestured for Clara to sit. "Clara, we all know what you did last night," Mrs. Marissa began, her voice neutral. "And while your actions were well-intentioned, you broke several hospital rules." Clara took a deep breath, preparing for the reprimand. "I understand, Mrs. Marissa, but I couldn't ignore those emergencies." Mrs. Marissa sighed, her eyes softening slightly. "No one is questioning your compassion or skill, Clara. You are one of the best nurses we have. But rules exist for a reason. Providing patient care outside the hospital, without the proper resources and support, puts you and the patients at risk." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of the words. "I just wanted to help." "And you did help," Mrs. Marissa said with a small smile. "Joao is stable thanks to you. And the girl, her mother called this morning. She's recovering well, but the hospital needs to maintain order. We need to discuss the consequences of this." Before Clara could respond, the office door opened, and the hospital director, Dr. Moreira, entered. He was a tall, imposing man with a presence that commanded respect. "Mrs. Marissa, Clara?" he greeted, nodding his head. "I was just discussing Clara's case with the board. We need to balance discipline with recognizing your value." Clara looked at Dr. Moreira, surprised and apprehensive. He continued, "Clara, what you did was extraordinary. Your dedication and courage saved lives. But we need to find a way to acknowledge that without compromising hospital rules." Mrs. Marissa and Dr. Moreira talked for a few more minutes, discussing possible approaches. Clara listened attentively, waiting for the verdict. Finally, Dr. Moreira turned to her. "Clara, we've decided you'll receive a formal warning for the off-duty procedure," he said, his voice firm but kind. "However, we'll also highlight your extraordinary work in our next internal bulletin and discuss improvements to our emergency response policies." Clara felt a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Dr. Moreira. Mrs. Marissa, I just want to do what's best for my patients." "And you do, Clara," Mrs. Marissa said, smiling. "Keep it up. But please, follow the rules from now on." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the satisfaction of knowing her work was recognized. She left the office, ready to face the next challenge, with the certainty that even in the toughest moments, she would always do what was necessary to save lives. The atmosphere in the hospital was tense. "Clara, despite the relief of having helped Joao and the girl, couldn't shake the growing concern about the consequences of her actions. Deep down, she knew rules had been broken, and the reality of repercussions was finally setting in. The next morning, Clara was summoned to an urgent meeting in the director's office. Upon arrival, she found Dr. Moreira and Dona Marissa waiting for her, their expressions serious. "Clara, please, have a seat," said Dr. Moreira, gesturing to the chair in front of the desk. Clara complied, feeling the weight of the moment. "Clara, your actions last night were admirable," began Dr. Moreira. "You demonstrated exceptional courage and skill. However, the board needs to consider the implications of your decisions. Treating patients outside of scheduled hours and without the hospital's proper resources is a breach of our safety and liability policies." Clara nodded, knowing this conversation was inevitable. "I understand, Dr. Moreira. I just wanted to help." Dona Marissa, with a compassionate look, intervened. "Clara, we know your heart is in the right place, but we have a responsibility to ensure the safety of everyone involved, including yourself. After much deliberation, the board has made a difficult decision." Clara felt a knot form in her stomach. Dr. Moreira continued, his voice firm yet gentle. "Clara, you will be suspended for 2 weeks. During this time, we hope you reflect on the importance of following hospital protocols. Your suspension is not just a punishment, but also an opportunity to ensure that we can all work together safely and effectively." Clara's world seemed to crumble at that moment. Nursing was her life, her passion. The idea of being away from the hospital, even for a short period, was devastating. Yet, she knew she needed to accept the decision with dignity. "I understand, Dr. Moreira." "Dona Marissa," said Clara, her voice trembling but determined. "I will use this time to reflect and learn. I want to continue to be the best professional I can be." Dr. Moreira nodded approvingly at Clara's response. "We believe in you, Clara, and we know you will come back even stronger." As Clara left the office, she felt a mix of emotions. The suspension was a harsh blow, but she also knew it was a consequence of her choices. Yet, the gratitude and support from her colleagues were palpable. Many approached her to offer words of encouragement and recognition for the exceptional work she had done. In the days that followed, Clara tried to keep herself busy. She volunteered at community centers, read about new medical practices, and reflected on her career. Each day away from the hospital was a reminder of how much she loved her profession and the importance of following established protocols to ensure everyone's safety. The suspension also gave her time to reconnect with friends and family who supported her unconditionally. They reminded her of the positive impact she had on so many lives and the importance of continuing her mission despite challenges. Finally, the 2 weeks came to an end. Clara returned to the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face any challenge with the same dedication and compassion that had always guided her. Her colleagues welcomed her back warmly, and Clara felt a deep gratitude for their support and the opportunity to continue doing what she loved most. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, Clara was ready to resume her place in the hospital, knowing that every choice and action was an important step in her journey as a dedicated and courageous nurse. The news spread like wildfire through the small town. Clara, the dedicated nurse who had risked her career to save a life, was now facing suspension for violating the hospital's strict policies. But while the administration was bound by bureaucratic procedures, the local community began to mobilize. At the corner cafe, Mrs. Martinez commented with an indignant voice, "Clara has always been an angel disguised as a nurse. If it were up to her, we'd have a whole ward dedicated to heroes like her." In the grocery store, Mr. Silva, known for his calm voice, didn't hide his concern. "It's absurd. She saved a life, and now they want to punish her? I can't accept that." Meanwhile, on social media, messages of support for Clara multiplied. A short video posted by a local resident showed children holding makeshift signs with messages of gratitude to Clara. The hashtag #ClaraHero emerged, flooding everyone's timelines in the small town. At the community center, an emergency meeting was called. There, People of all ages and backgrounds gathered to discuss what they could do to help Clara. Proposals for petitions, peaceful demonstrations in front of the hospital, and even fundraisers to cover any legal costs began to emerge. As the sun set on that spring afternoon, the town, united by a sense of justice and gratitude, promised not to rest until Clara was recognized not only as an exceptional nurse, but as a symbol of courage and humanity. As the local community rallied in support of Clara, her story gained broader attention in the media. The debate on ethics and rules in the healthcare sector simmered in morning talk show roundtables and in editorials of major regional newspapers. In the local TV studio, the main anchor led a heated discussion. Our nurse Clara showed bravery in saving a life, but are hospital policies outdated? Are we sacrificing common sense in the name of inflexible rules? On the opposite side of the table, a medical ethics expert argued firmly. Policies exist to protect patients and professionals. We should support heroism, but we must also respect established protocols to ensure the safety and integrity of the healthcare system. Meanwhile, on social media, the discussion escalated further. Influential profiles shared divergent opinions while followers engaged in passionate debates in the comments. An opinion piece went viral, questioning whether the law of the heart should prevail over regulatory law in cases like Clara's. In cafes and living rooms, families discussed what would be fair for Clara and for future anonymous heroes who might emerge. Opinions varied, but the consensus was clear. Clara's courage had touched the heart of the town, and the system needed to find a way to honor that without compromising its core principles. As the debate intensified, Clara remained at the center of this storm of opinions, uncertain of the outcome that the future held for her career and her life. Meanwhile, as Clara faced the weight of hospital policies and the fervent public debate, an emotional bond was strengthening behind the scenes. The patient she had saved, John, a middle-aged man whose life depended on Clara's decisive intervention, felt compelled to do something. With his family's help, John recorded a simple yet deeply emotional video. Sitting next to his wife, holding her hand with visible gratitude in his eyes, he began, "I want to talk about Clara. She's not just a nurse to me. She's the reason I'm here today." John's voice trembled slightly, but his determination was clear. He described how Clara arrived at the most critical moment of his life, how she acted with courage and compassion to stabilize him when all resources seemed insufficient. His wife gently interrupted, adding words of support and gratitude for the woman who had returned her husband to her. "Clara risked everything for me," John continued, his eyes shining with the intensity of his words. "I wouldn't be here without her. Please understand that what she did was more than following rules. It was about saving a life. And now, we as a community must support her the same way she supported us." The video was shared on social media and quickly went viral. Comments of support flooded the posts, echoing the feelings of gratitude and solidarity expressed by John and his family. As the town prepared for the next chapter of the story, John's voice echoed as a powerful reminder of the impact of an act of courage and compassion. As public pressure and emotional appeals grew, behind the scenes at the hospital stirred an intense internal investigation. Under the media spotlight and public scrutiny, the hospital administration found itself compelled to act swiftly and transparently. A team of investigators was assigned to scrutinize every detail of Clara's incident. They reviewed medical records, emergency protocols, and strict guidelines governing employee conduct outside regular hours. Every decision Clara made on that crucial night was meticulously examined, sparking heated internal debates on the balance between ethics and compliance. Meanwhile, Clara herself faced an emotional whirlwind. She found herself at the center of a storm that exceeded even her boldest expectations. Community support was reassuring, but the future of her career remained uncertain. In the hospital corridors, Clara's colleagues whispered in hushed tones, torn between admiration for her courage and respect for the rules governing their work. Nurses and doctors engaged in passionate debates about the ethical implications of the case, while patients expressed solidarity with the woman who had risked so much for one of their own. As the investigation progressed, the hospital prepared for a decision that would not only shape Clara's future, but also shed light on fundamental issues of justice and morality in the healthcare sector. Deep down, Clara waited hopefully, trusting that truth and understanding would prevail over the shadows of uncertainty. Tension reached its peak both in the hospital and the community as everyone anxiously awaited the final decision. After weeks of intense investigation and public debate, the crucial moment arrived. On a Tuesday afternoon, the hospital administration called a press conference. Clara, surrounded by supporters and family, held trembling hands as she awaited the news that would determine her future. The hospital director, with a serious expression, took the floor. He acknowledged Clara's courage and dedication but emphasized the importance of policies that ensured safety and the institution's smooth operation. For a moment, it seemed the decision would stand, and Clara felt a tightening in her chest. However, then came the twist. With a look of understanding toward Clara, the director announced that, after careful review and recognizing the positive impact of her actions, the suspension would be revoked. The crowd around Clara erupted in applause and tears of relief. It was a victory not just for Clara but for all who had supported her cause. The director continued, highlighting the need to review and update policies to better reflect the humanitarian values Clara embodied. He promised that the hospital would learn from this incident to ensure that future heroes would not face similar dilemmas. As reporters asked questions and camera flashes popped, Clara felt a mix of gratitude and humility. She looked at John and his family, at the community that had rallied around her, and knew that while her journey had been tough, the end result had been worth it. And so, Clara not only returned to her work, but also became a symbol of courage, compassion, and perseverance. Her story not only changed lives, but also changed the very system that had once challenged her. Click on the videos that are being recommended to you now.